Kevina doesn't know how a computer works by ran 0M glitch. This story took place about a week ago. For those of you who saw my last post on this sub, the Kevina in this story is that Kevin's sister. Anyway, on to the story. So I had helped Kevina set up a computer about 2 weeks earlier. I was naturally surprised when Kevina called stating her computer wasn't working. I thought about it, trying to figure out what may have gone wrong in my installation. I asked a few questions just to get a general sense of what happened. After a lot of question asking, I decide to just go over and take a look. When I arrive, Kevina opens the door. K, you need to fix my computer. M, that's what I'm here for. K, you ruined it, so it's all your fault. M, okay? I over to the desk where I had set the computer up and instantly notice that the actual tower is missing. Confused, I look around. M, where did the tower go? K, the what? M, the big box that was sitting down here? K, oh, I threw that away. It took up too much space. At first, I was confused that she had thrown the actual computer away. All she had was the monitor, mouse, and keyboard, which were not plugged in. I simply let out a chuckle and explained to her that without the box, her computer wouldn't work. It took a while to convince her, since her Kevin brother had messed up her understanding of technology. Luckily, the tower was still sitting outside her kitchen, and after cleaning it up a bit, it was up and running. I returned home shortly. I just laughed and fell asleep. Edit. For those of you asking why I still fixed the computer after she was rude to me, the only reason I did was because her brother is a god friend of mine. Wasn't trying to mess anything up between us.
My girlfriend is a Kevin. So far, I have discovered, by Sue Canis girl_. She thinks deviated rectum and septum are interchangeable conditions and that one would have no problem discussing their deviated rectum with strangers. She believes that placenta is the can't think of the word, sorry I have a brain disease, collective? Multiple / meaning more than one form of the word placebo. Believes the moon landing was staged as are all other images and recordings from space. World War II never happened. Didn't know there was a difference between the Civil War and the Revolutionary War, but knows that she has the right to fly the Confederate flag and that Robert E. Lee was a valiant leader. Didn't know that whales had babies. She just thought they were. I cannot convince her otherwise. She believes that there is a predetermined amount of whales already in the ocean and I guess, they just never die. Yesterday, I washed my face and forgot to bring in a towel. I blindly grabbed for the one that was on the towel rack behind me and dried my eyes. They immediately started burning and I inhaled a horrible chemical smell, so strong it hurt my lungs. I started coughing and gagging and screaming for help. I was flushing my eyes, my skin burning, my throat burning and it smelled like bleached. I screamed, what was on this towel? She says, you didn't use it, did you? Bleach, ammonia and goo gone. I ended up at urgent care. Turns out, I could have died and or blinded myself. You didn't use it, did you? PFFFT. No, why would I do such a thing? The worst thing was, she wouldn't tell me what was on it for over 20 minutes. BC she claimed it wasn't she who left it there. It's only the two of us who live here and I know I didn't do it. Lol. Uck.
Kevina and birth control by Shalamarr. My friend, Kevina, got pregnant with her second child fairly soon after she had her first. When I heard the news, I called to congratulate her. Me, congrats on the baby. Kevina, glumly, thanks. It was an accident, though. Me, oh? Kevina, yeah. I mean, I was breastfeeding, kid 1, that was supposed to prevent pregnancy. Me, were you using any other kind of birth control? Kevina, no, of course not. This article I read in Bullshit Magazine said it was foolproof. Me, okay. Kevina, did you know that it's still possible to get pregnant, even though you're breastfeeding? Me, I never thought about it, but I would have guessed it was at least possible, yeah. Kevina, humph. Edited to add, as a lot of folks have mentioned, Breastfeeding is indeed known to reduce a woman's fertility, but it's by no means foolproof.
The Kevin who smoked herself out of a jar by Grid 1 Oct. Yes, this is a female Kevin. Yes, mobile sucks. Let's get on with the story. So I have this coworker who I rarely work with, damn fine specimen of a Kevin. Doesn't claim responsibility for obvious things. So for the fun stuff in short story form. 1. She claimed not to know anything about cleaning after working there at least a year, claiming not to be trained. Then decides to sit around watching others clean or do the same thing she claimed not to know another day. 2. Has a food handler's course, proceeds to sit up on a food prep counter, acts confused as to why it's an issue. 3. Is shown multiple times what to use to clean the Mary Kef quick oven that you see at places like sub-stores to toast food, decided to grab the e-oil that we use to lube a meat slicer in the same night and start wiping down the inside. The following morning it nearly burnt the store down when it was warming up, filling the store with smoke. Obviously that last one caused her to be fired. Maybe more, those 3 stuck out.
This is a tale of an actual Kevin. He got very, very stuck. By KitonePeach. So, in college today, we students were discussing primates in Madagascar. Kevin was making a lot of noise, so the teacher let him wander about the room. Kevin's not bright. He wandered too far from the class, so a student guided him to the front of the room and the teacher bribed him with some food. He pulled on a cable, so a student had to move him away and tuck the cable out of sight. He managed to wedge himself into a small space between a water trough and a wall, and couldn't easily back out. I think he was still trying to wedge himself further in, so the teacher and one of the students had to work to move the trough and pull him out. Kevin wasn't allowed to enter the room after that. Kevin's a tortoise. Edit, thanks for the gold. Did not expect my college's naive tortoise to result in me getting a shiny.
Kevin may be from a planet with multiple moons by SqueemishSquash. Backstory: I'm in the Coast Guard and I was stationed with this Kevin many years ago. One of his jobs at the time was to stand as a lookout while out on patrol. Basically, he went up to a deck above the bridge and called down any boats, aircraft, or hazards to navigation that radar or us driving the boat may have missed. Kevin was known top to bottom for being the most Kevin-y Kevin. Anywhere from showing up on a Wednesday and walking around the boat in civilian clothes asking everyone why they were at work on a Saturday to going down to the engine room and trying to rewire our electric panels to be more efficient because he read a book about it one time. This particular night I was on the midwatch, 12 a.m. to 4 a.m., with Kevin in the Gulf of Alaska. Myself and 3 others on the bridge driving the boat and Kevin up top standing lookout. It started as any watch with him would, him calling down obvious shooting stars as flare sightings and us getting yelled at by the captain for alerting him of anything Kevin says despite policy dictating we have to do so. Hours into the night, we notice there is a full, blood orange moon in the sky. We discuss it for several minutes and start to move on to other conversation topics. No sooner do we move on than we receive a report from Kevin that went something like, "Kevin, I have a surface contact bearing /_______________________________________________________________________________________________________________ approximately miles away. Very normal contact report, but the officer in charge decides to go over and check out the newly reported contact. He notices that there are only 2 contacts in that area and they have both already been called out by Kevin. Maybe an honest mistake. I call back up to him to have him clarify, but no, he insists there is a 3rd contact. I then proceed to ask him jokingly if he called out the moon as a surface contact. It must be noted that the moon is also fairly high up in the sky. This man replies with, "Oh yeah, maybe. My bad, we just don't have any moons like that where I'm from, so I figured it was a weird boat." Kevin was never allowed to stand lookout again.
Kevin can't afford a phone plan with extra data, so she pays $600 overages instead. By Red-Stilleto. My roommate. Kevin is a germaphobe. She pressed crosswalk buttons with her elbow and won't use public bathrooms unless it's an emergency. That doesn't make her a Kevin. She comes home and refuses to clean anything. Ever. I found mold growing in the bathroom and asked why it doesn't count as gross to her. Because it's my gross, my germs don't count. She believes that washing dishes with soap lowers your immune system, so she just rinses them and puts them away. Even if they've sat there for a week with food on them. She only does the dishes when we run out of them, and since I work 2 jobs I can't always keep up with it. However, she scrubs the parts where someone's mouth touched because someone else's germs. I pull cups out of the cabinet with old dry milk in the bottom, and that does not bother her at all. At least the rim was scrubbed. So now I wash everything before I use it and after. She threw away all our food once because she found a bug in the cabinet and was worried it was all contaminated. 1 bug, and everything had to go, even sealed cans of soup gone. She believes everything she reads. Like the soap thing. One day we're doing laundry and she puts her work shirt in the dryer. Before she'd been adamant they could not go in the dryer or they'd shrink and get ruined, so I asked her what changed. She read online that the plumbing is all connected, which means that the toilets and the washing machine are connected and there's poop flowing into the washing machine. The only way to clean the bacteria of the poop out is to dry them at high temperatures in the dryer, so she cannot skip the dryer anymore because she does not want poop on her clothes. She brought gloves to change the laundry into the dryer and wouldn't believe anything when I told her that wasn't true. It didn't help that we lived in an apartment complex and you could hear people in the apartment above the laundry room, and sometimes you'd hear a toilet flush and water flowing through pipes in the ceiling. The night before we moved we threw a party where someone spilled red wine on the carpet and offered to clean it up. She replied, "We're moving, don't bother." I rushed over with supplies and said I want my security deposit back. And cleaned it up while she just shrugged. She made more money than me but couldn't afford her phone bill. She had a bare minimum plan where texts and data cost after a certain point. She couldn't afford the more expensive plan, so she just paid around $600 in overages every month because she always went over the limits. She was also a few months behind, so if she missed a payment her phone would get shut off immediately, and the late fees kept racking up with it all. When she got her paycheck we were loaded. She'd blow it on anything and everything she wanted and have no thought of next week. Then the following week she'd be poor with $20 in her account, anxiously waiting for payday, wondering if she could survive, only to blow it all again once it came. No savings and no backup plan. She started dating a guy because she was afraid of saying no to him. Got into an abusive relationship and then couldn't leave because she was afraid of what he would do. That part was more sad than anything else, and I did everything I could to help her escape. She's okay now, well, at least safe from him. I can't really promise she's okay as I moved away. Sorry it came out so long.
My mother and Don't Know What a Lake Is by CirrusMoth. My family is full of Kevins and racists, but that's for another sub. This is one of my favorite stories I like to tell, and I can't believe I haven't posted here yet. I went to college in central New York, where my school was situated on the banks of Lake Ontario. For those not from the US, it's one of the Great Lakes and is between the US and Canada. As for the great part, it's fucking huge, approx 50 miles between the countries at its widest. Thus, standing at the bank where my school is, you cannot see the other side. My mother and my aunt drove me to campus on move-in day. Having never been to the school before, I directed my aunt to drive the long way along the edge of campus so we could get a good look at the lake. The view was impressive. The following conversation, however, reminded me solidly why I needed college and to move far away from my hometown. "Mom, what's that river?" "Me, that's Lake Ontario, Mom, WTF. And, I wonder if y'all see whales." "Me, joking, I don't think they come this far inland." "And, what if I got you a good pair of binoculars?" "Me, if you can find a pair that can see the Atlantic from here, I'm gonna be really impressed." Cue several minutes of explanation about giant lakes and the fact that a whale wouldn't survive swimming up a freshwater river all that way even if it was large enough to accommodate a fucking whale. I only wish it was the time of smartphones so I could have brought up a damn map. Edited for formatting.
My Dad the Kevin, and Me, Kevin Jr., by Rasatra. My dad is a brilliant scientist. He is a PhD chemist and patent holder who's been promoted so high up in his company that they don't even have a job description of what he's supposed to be doing. That being said, he's one of those people with so many points in intelligence that his wisdom score, well, it got a little overlooked. Here are a few highlights. My dad is from LA, but went to college in Oklahoma. His dorm mates were able to convince him that rats could get in through electrical outlets, so he unplugged everything and taped over the outlets. They also told him the rats would climb up his pants, so he went around with rubber bands around the bottom of his pants. He swore for years that his ankles were bald because he shaved them once in college. He was in his 50s. He once got into an argument with my mom about the fly swatter being clean. He was probably trying to get to leave it on the counter, and said he'd prove it by licking it. As soon as he had licked it, he realized his mistake and that this was an object used to smash the guts from creatures that eat shit. His eyes got really wide, and with his tongue still out, he ran to the kitchen to scrub his tongue with water. Last Christmas my sister had us play some little games that involve small goodies and prizes. My dad got his hands on some little shaped erasers, which he briefly mistook for candy and put in his mouth. Mid-game he just starts spitting out erasers, yelling, "Don't eat the erasers. They are not delicious." Not a warning that they aren't candy, or even that they taste bad. No, they were not delicious. Once my dad was convinced it was a good idea to get my mom perfume that cost less than $1 as a gift for a birthday or anniversary, I'm not sure which, and mind you, things were cheaper in the 90s but not that much cheaper. My older sister, who was probably 8 or 9, knew better and tried to talk him out of it, but he insisted. It did not go well. My dad went to a retirement seminar and freaked out because they said to close your eyes and picture your retirement, but it was just black. He decided to get a hobby. He tried golf and bowling. He lost interest in golf pretty quickly, but he joined a bowling league that he loved. He fit in great and was always high-fiving the other guys. One night my mom went to see him bowl and realized all these guys he's fitting in great with are intellectually disabled people bussed over from a nearby group home. As a kid, my dad would get kicked out of things for being a rule breaker and prankster. He got kicked out of a scouts meeting and thought, hey, if I just screw around until I'm supposed to be home, my mom will never know. It didn't cross his mind that of course they had called his mom and she was pissed when he finally showed back up at home. She was a crazy strict lady and I have no idea how he made it out alive considering his personality. He worked at McDonald's for a bit in the 60s and even won an Employee of the Month award. However, he met his match when a customer ordered a Big Mac with no meat. He just froze, unable to comprehend how to make such a thing. A manager actually had to do it for him. A couple years ago we went to the zoo and my dad decided to exercise his propensity for reading signs aloud while on the tram. He's just sitting there yelling out loudly every sign and animal he sees. Rhino. Rhino Reserve. Rhino. And then just belts out, "I will read the signs." We got some looks to be sure. There are a million more stories and I could go on about my dad all day, but the thing is he definitely passed his genes on to me. Here's a few choice Kevin Jr. moments. In high school, if the teacher ever asked me to bring papers to their desk, I would start doing the Mission Impossible theme and finger guns while rolling on the floor to bring it there. A couple kids were being major Debbie Downers in class, and to lighten the mood I thought for some reason, it would help to yell, "I like chocolate pudding." This coincided with a major lull in classroom volume and ended with every kid looking at me as I grinned like an idiot. I thought the Father Abraham we sang about in church was Abraham Lincoln for an embarrassing amount of time. I thought Cleveland was in Ireland until I was like 15. When I graduated high school, there were 2 gaps in the procession. One in front of a kid who couldn't walk well due to physical issues, and one in front of me due to being confused about what the hell I was doing. I also made another gap in the line to get the diploma as I totally spaced out and kids around me had to shout my name to get my attention to fumble up there. Ironically, I graduated with a 4.0 as a Nation Merit Scholarship semifinal and was consistently one of the smartest and dumbest kids in my class of 300 some odd kids. In college I was bored with a class as I had already finished what we were working on and thought of a brilliant plan. I would pretend to drop my pencil, and when I got down to pick it up, I'd just crawl out of class. Perfect. My plan went smoothly. The door swung open as I crawled out of the room and my professor, obviously tipped off, just yells, "Bye, Rasatra." I paused for a moment on the ground. "Bye," I shouted back, and continued to freedom. In college I got the bright idea to become Catholic. I started the class you have to take to join, heard you can't masturbate, and bailed. On my first day at my job at Staples, I was asked to face aisle 1. This means to straighten everything up. I asked them to repeat what they said, and after they said it again, I rotated around 100 degrees and faced aisle 1. Once at that same job, I had a panic attack before my shift and took a Xanax. After that, I had a very caffeinated beverage. It accidentally got me very high and I just went up and down the aisles saying how good I felt. Caffeine and I have a complicated relationship. I was banned from caffeine at a Starbucks once. On a family road trip in my early 20s, I decided to continue making YOLO decisions, including not going to the bathroom at the only restroom for miles. Guess when the sudden intense urge to pee hit me? Of course, my dad and I have had some great adventures together. Once he took me fishing and I caught my first fish. We were super stoked and lamented we couldn't take a picture to commemorate the occasion. We sadly took the hook out of the little guy and threw him back into the water. We get into my dad's truck and a few miles down the road, without even looking over at me, he says, "Rasatra, I had a camera on my phone." Once we discovered the magical ability we had to unsettle strangers just by smiling broadly at them. We practiced this during an outing that was just the two of us, and grinned all through Walmart. We realized, however, that we were crunched for time and with our arms laden with merchandise, bolted full speed toward the registers/exit grinning wildly. Now if my dad tried to make a smile on command, he looks like a serial killer. Think Sheldon Cooper trying to smile, so I can only imagine the heart attacks we gave those poor cashiers. I'm sure I have more stories, but that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed my stories about my dad the Kevin as much as I enjoy being his Kevin Jr. Note, before you ask, I am diagnosed autism spectrum and ADHD, and my dad, though he doesn't have a diagnosis, has made peace with whatever Rasatra has. That's what I have. Edit, spelling. Edit 2, it was a Big Mac, not a Whopper as I originally put. Just me having a Kevin Jr. moment confusing my burgers.
Kevina Gets an Intern by skynolongerblue. Oh holy Moses, there is no fucking God on this earth. You see, some people wake up in their mid-adult life deciding that they need to start a family, or at least adopt a cat or two or 67. Maybe get an ant farm, or sponsor a starving child in Sudan or Alabama or some other backwoods hellhole. Nope, not this time. Kevina, having burned through 2 husbands and with no children, decided she needed an intern a couple of months ago. She needed one, damn it. Kevina, the poor darling, did not realize that Mike had set in some very, very strict rules about interns and their hiring at our organization. It might be due to strict rules regarding volunteering, payment of dues, and relationships with our local university to make sure that interns are treated fairly and given credit for their work, but I'd like to think that it's probably because Mike murdered the last few and now wears their nipples as a belt. I need to stop reading about Ed Gein, it's really having an effect on my marriage. Cue Kevina and Mike, who usually get along like a house on fire, screaming at each other in Mike's office a few months ago about getting Kevina an intern. Kevina, I deserve an intern. You will get me an intern. Mike, I don't have to get you anything. I am above you. Why do you deserve an intern anyway? Kevina, I need someone to mold, to train, to make as my own. To teach them my ways. You'd think saying something that damn weird and creepy would have made Mike jizz his off-colored Costco brand slacks. Nope. Mike follows the rules like the good reincarnation of Eichmann that he is, and said no. Kevina shrieks like a Trump supporter at a Pelosi tweet, and goes to our CEO. CEO says, okay, as long as it's off the books, we will let you have an intern. We will ignore them being here. Kevina claps with joy, and within days, a confused young man from the local university is sitting in a random cubicle by mine. He introduces himself as Bob, and has a nice young man, thinks this'll pad his resume when he graduates in June and looks to apply to graduate school in our field. Maybe he'll even get a lab position. So Kevina promised him an internship in the lab as her assistant, even though she doesn't do lab work and her job title says as much. Oh Bob, the poor thing. Maybe has a Kevin too. Bob was with us for a blessed 3 weeks. Most of the time he spent sitting at his desk, occasionally helping me prep our education equipment, take random calls, manage heavy amounts of copier paper, and generally be ignored by Kevina, who proceeded to act as if she never knew him. Most days, she forgot his name, and even starting calling him by random, generic male names. Hi Ethan. George. How's it going? Mark. I hope you had a good weekend. Whenever Bob would ask her for help, she would tell him that he would figure her out soon. What does that mean, Kevina? What does that mean? If Bob tried doing something, such as help our data analyst out with additional work, without Kevina's knowledge, Kevina would stomp and yell at him for trying to move to another team. We don't have other teams, Kevina, you dolt. Bob always smiled and nodded. Being ignored by Kevina and occasionally belittled was okay, as long as he got his internship hours in. But then the call came in. His advisor was not thrilled about him desk-sitting and moving papers when he could be working in an actual lab. Rather than our organization, which has some labs, but doesn't do official research internships. Advisor was not giving him credit, and wanted to speak to Kevina. Bob transferred the call to Kevina, who claimed that she never knew him, and had no idea what he was doing here. Bob immediately had a meltdown. Screaming, he proceeded to grab the phone on his cubicle, smashing and cracking it as he screamed about how he was never going to get into medical school now. Shortly after his tantrum, my boss, Chief Science Officer, and Mike, walked him out. Recently, Kevina mentioned at our most recent staff meeting how wonderful it was to have an intern in the office, and how we needed to do that more often. No, Kevina, no.
Kevin shops for the thing with the thing that comes out by daneelthesane. About a decade and a half ago, I was working retail at a dollar store. Kevin had one of those faces that made you wonder if he was related to himself, and he came up to me, and asked, I shit you not. Do you have the thing with the thing that comes out? I gave Kevin a second to see if he would realize what he had said and provide some detail. After a beat or two, I said, I'm sorry, sir, you will have to be a bit more specific. What thing are you looking for? Kevin made hand gestures, almost as if he were pulling open a door or something, and said, you know. One of those things with the thing that comes out. Managing not to lose my temper, I said, sir. What does the thing do? He said, it makes coffee. I said, are you asking if we have coffee makers that have filter baskets that can be pulled completely out? Yes, said Kevin. I replied, no, sir, we don't have the thing with the thing that comes out, we only have the thing with the thing that swivels out. Sorry. Later, Kevin came up to me again. He held up a box of 35-gallon trash bags. He asked me, will these fit in that? And he pointed at a trash can that was clearly marked, 50 gallons. I said, no, sir. He asked, why not? I said, because that is a 50-gallon trash can, and those are 35-gallon bags. He looked at me blankly for a moment. I added, 35 is less than 50. Ah, he said, nodding sagely.
Kevina and the Netflix payment by gayandgreen. I share my Netflix subscription with my former roommate from college, Kevina, and 2 other girls. Everyone pays me monthly and the subscription is paid automatically via credit card, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. The email registered is mine, so I'm the only one who gets emails from Netflix like payment issues, new shows, etc. Last week, however, I get a message from Kevina asking me if everything is alright with the Netflix payment. Before answering her, I open Netflix to see if it's working, as sometimes the credit card limit is reached and the automatic payment doesn't work. Everything is fine, I can watch whatever I want. So I texted her back. Me, it's all fine, why? Kevina, I just got an email from Netflix saying we need to update the payment method. I thought maybe your credit card was maxed out or something. Me, How could you receive an email from Netflix if there's no account linked to it? Kevina: oh yeah. That's right. I guess it's a scam, then. Me: you think? I never thought this kind of scam could work, never thought there was someone who would fall for something so easy to check out. Apparently, I was wrong. She could have easily had her credit card info stolen if it was her account.
Coworker Kevina does not know how bridges work, what Brussels sprouts are, or that 2 equals 2 by avocadopixels. For the past several years I have worked with Kevina. I will keep the details as anonymous as possible. 1. I actually interviewed the same day as Kevina. This should have been a sign of what working with her would be like. As we're leaving the interview, Kevina asks, they said they would only hire 2 people. How many people do you think that means they will hire? 2. Kevina will regularly read work emails, sent to everyone, and call me to ask questions such as they said the meeting would be at 4 p.m. Do you think that means the meeting is at 4 p.m.? 3. Kevina does not know which department she works in. 4 years now she tells people she works in Department X when we actually work in Department Y. 4. Kevina did not know we would be paid for overtime, for an hourly job. Admin messed up and she hadn't gotten paid, possibly due to 3 and 14 months later she makes a comment in their office like, isn't it funny that at this job they don't pay overtime? To the shock and awe of all of us in the same office. 5. Kevina does not understand simple calculations, such as 1/4 equals 5/20. 6a. Kevina tried to come into work on a national holiday when everything was closed with much advance notice. 6b. Kevina told newer employees to come in on the same national holiday. 6c. Kevina called all of our bosses and me in a panic when she couldn't open any doors to any buildings on said national holiday. Woke everyone up at an ungodly hour on our day off. 7. Kevina will send 5 emails in a row, then 5 subsequent text messages asking if I received each of her emails. On a Sunday night. At 11:30 p.m. 8. If I send an email to the whole work group, including Kevina, chances are that Kevina will send the exact same email, sometimes verbatim, to the same work group the next day. 9. Kevina averages 48 hours to complete a task most can do in 45 minutes. 10. We prepare educational materials, and as we must share materials and presentations, this becomes quite difficult as Kevina will prepare entirely the wrong thing. For example, she misunderstood that the free market is not the same as the United Nations. 11. Kevina is incapable of completing any tasks by the deadline, so our hierarchy has made up personalized deadlines for her that are several weeks in advance. Outside of work, Kevina is quite a trip. 12. Kevina does not know the difference between Brussels sprouts and green beans. 13. Kevina has never heard of the Loch Ness Monster. 14. Kevina has never heard of current events such as, at the time, the Mueller investigation, the Cambridge Analytica scandal, the royal wedding of Harry and Meghan. 15. Kevina lives in a very nice apartment downtown. She does not understand that her rent is double what mine is, but my place is bigger, as I live 10 minutes from downtown in a residential area. Kevina then informed our colleagues that I live in government housing, and no longer comes over for work parties at mine as I live in an unsafe area. BTW Terry's zero shame in living in government housing, but apparently Kevina thinks there is. 16. The one time Kevina did come over, she was absolutely floored that I had a closed-off pantry. Kevina had never seen a pantry. 17. Kevina once asked how to cross to the other side of the canal in town. I pointed out the various bridges that you can drive or walk over. Kevina did not realize they would take you to the other side. Kevina's bus to work crosses the canal on one of these bridges every day. This is just the tip of the iceberg. If I think of anything else aloud as I go along. Edit, she was an alternate. Another candidate and I got selected, then the other person had to back out last minute for personal reasons. They went down the list of candidates and she was the first one who was still available.
Kevina, my sister, doesn't understand how, or care, to properly quarantine while waiting for test results and endangers another family with children. By Ye Holy 82. Update: test was negative. Thank goodness. Now hopefully they can manage to not contract the virus from here on out. My sister, 33F, has always been a Kevina. She has never been one to make decisions based on reality, always on what she wants to believe. You'll have to think of some stories for a future post. Anyway, this is a complicated story, but I'll do my best to make sense of it. For background, she and I both live with my dad. She also has a daughter and her boyfriend living here as well. I have kids who spend a few days a week here as well. I am planning to move out soon, but that's beside the point. Last week, Kevina's BF, also a Kevin, told her he was coughing and having trouble breathing. He was refusing to come home early from work to see about getting tested. He thinks it's not that bad. She proceeds to tell the rest of us she thinks he might have COVID-19, so I immediately start trying to find out about him getting tested, etc. I'm seriously freaking out and worrying about my kids because they had been here a couple of days before, and message my ex to let him know. He freaks out. At this point my sister is becoming more and more vague about the situation. I'm trying to get her to make BF come home and get to the doctor, but she's saying he feels okay now and has not worried. We agreed to let him finish out his shift, against my better judgment, and she would take him either when he got home or the next morning. As the day goes on, her story continues to change until eventually it's fine, it's just allergies. He doesn't get tested. My ex-husband and I chalk it up to her overreacting and thinking the idea of someone having coronavirus would give her some drama, she loves drama, and cure her boredom. The next 5 or so days go by completely normal. Then my sister decided she needed to go to the doctor because her asthma or sarcoidosis, yes she actually has this rare house MD disease, is acting up. She calls, they meet her outside and treat her. She comes home and says they are treating her for pneumonia. The next day, BF comes home early from work due to trouble breathing and coughing. This time it's worse. She calls the doc and they say he needs to get tested for coronavirus. So they go, and when she gets there they tell her since they already tested her yesterday, she had no idea they tested her for IT, that they weren't going to test him because if she's positive then he is too. Before telling me that she had been tested, she texts me and asks if it's okay if they go get his vape liquid BC. I was watching her daughter. I tell her since he's being tested we need to quarantine, not go in stores right now. She says he will stay in the car. I know I can't convince her so I just say okay. She comes home with grocery store fried chicken, which means they went to more than one store, and I roll my eyes. Can't tell these dingoes anything. And then she tells me he didn't get tested because she did the day before. I asked her why she didn't tell me, my kids were at the house that day, and she says she didn't know because they didn't tell her. I tell her that's ridiculous. There's no way they would do that and not say what it's for because it's not a standard test and they would explain it to you. She just shrugs and says all I know is I could feel where they stuck it in for 10 minutes afterward. So of course I then question her why she would go in stores knowing she could have it, even after I warned her. We were hungry, is her response. Fast forward a couple days to today and we are all just waiting on the results which are supposed to come by Tuesday. My sister and BF have stayed home, praise be, and everyone except my dad have been quarantining. My dad is not a Kevin but is a right-wing nut, which is worse. However, I find out this morning that my niece had gone to stay with her aunt and cousins on her dad's side. I have no idea if my sister told them that she is waiting on her coronavirus test. But she has now just exposed a whole family to it. I'm at a complete loss. I actually thought she was trying to comply. Fair warning to you all. This is why you need to limit your excursions and wash your hands religiously. Kevins are gonna kill us all. TL, Dr. Kevina can't follow simple quarantine rules and puts a whole other family in danger of contracting coronavirus even though she only has to wait 2 more days to find out if she's positive.
Dated a Kevin by YouveGotARagingClue. As much as this pains me to admit, I dated a Kevin. You could tell his name was Kevin, because he had it tattooed in a semicircle above his belly button. No joke. To put him in perspective, imagine a 44-year mama's boy who never let go of the apron strings. Ate dinner at his parents' house every day. He did fool me at first because he lived in an actual house by himself, but it turns out it is a family house, so he doesn't even get points for moving out. One time, he invited me to go to the Ripley's aquarium. They have a really neat tank that you actually go through via a tunnel. They also offer show times for live feedings and various demonstrations. One of the special demonstrations that day was a live mermaid show. This is held in a large tank with audience viewing from a large glass portal. There were children lined up watching, enthralled, as the 2 young women in mermaid costumes dove in the tank and swam up and down for their amusement. My thoughts while watching them was mainly how they must be experts at holding their breath. It was neat to watch. Just then, Kevin gets my attention. He asks, "Is it real?" Perplexed, I tried to think what could be real, and assumed he was asking if it was a live show or some sort of pre-recorded viewing on a large screen. I replied that it was live. He asks again, "Is it real? Are they real mermaids?" I was floored. I realized by then he was bless his heart level, but really? Real mermaids? I did the only thing I could, which was to answer with a straight face, struggling not to let it crack, that yes, they were real mermaids. Unfortunately, that is not the dumbest thing he ever did. Nowadays I watch from the sidelines not dating him, and try to laugh.
Kevin learns about menstruation cycles by X or Zero. This is a story about my girlfriend's college dorm neighbor, Kevin. My GF was sitting in the living room of her dorm, along with some female friends of hers. They were talking about nothing special when Kevin showed up. Kevin asked what the girls were talking about, but since they wanted to be left alone they answered, "Oh, we're just comparing our menstruation cycles." They expected him to leave, but instead he sat down next to them on the sofa and started thinking so hard you could see steam coming out of his ears. After some minutes of silence he asked, "Do men need to do this too?" The girls bursted out in laughter. Kevin realized that something must have gone wrong and started producing steam again. A few minutes later his eyes brightened up and he yelled, "Oh, menstruation. I thought you meant masturbation."
Coworker Kevina doesn't believe in dinosaurs by the-pettySage. I only recently discovered this sub and am happy to have somewhere appropriate to post this. Kevina, early 20s, announced at work the other day that she doesn't believe in the existence of dinosaurs because there isn't any tangible evidence they ever existed. Apparently it's impossible for bones to be evidence because all bones look the same. They could be from anything. Followed by wait. All animals have the same bones, right? Speaking of bones, how can we be sure that those are bones in the first place? Everyone was laughing at first, but toward the end of the debate a lot of folks were quite frustrated. I wish I had thought at the time to ask her what the motive could possibly be for scientists faking dinosaurs.
Kevin and Karen expect to go to another country, without a passport by LilSunnyBoi. Sorry for formatting, on mobile. My family and I were just returning from a trip to see our relatives in Brazil, and we were going back home to Chicago. We were at the bag check, and we heard some commotion from the people behind us. Out come Kevin and Karen. If you have been to an airport, you cannot bring liquid items above 100 milliliters on the plane. They are making a fuss with the security about which of their thousands of full shampoo bottles and waters they had. They passed the bag check, now with much emptied luggage, and now we're doing the passport check. Sorry if that's not what it's called. Our fam got called up for them to look at our passports. Like normal. Then Kevin and Karen got called up to the booth next to us. We overheard them talking to the guy, then showing them their IDs and expecting that to pass them through. The man had to explain to them that you need a passport to go through, then them saying they didn't have a passport, and they started reviewing their options. I didn't really hear the rest, but they both walked out of the place with winded looking faces. Thanks for reading.
Kevin got a $5,000 stereo. By G42. This guy I knew, not a friend, just somehow knew him, isn't worth any character development or backstory. Just a Kevin. He told me to come to his house to check out his $5,000 stereo. I love music and good sound equipment, so damn right I was interested. I get there and it's just this bottom-end home theater in a box you could get at any Walmart or Best Buy for $400. I ask him how this is a $5,000 stereo. He says he got it from a rent-to-own place for $10 a week. But they charge an $80 fee if you're late on a payment. And he was late on every single payment for a year. Really?
Kevin fell for his own trap. By Bezerky. Back when I was in college, my freshman year, I shared a dorm with Kevin and a few others. One day, one of our roommates, we never figured out who, started to steal Kevin's food. As clueless as he was, Kevin was an amazing chef. After a while, the great idea came to Kevin to fill his sandwich with laxatives, so the thief would be revealed and punishes. He did just so. He made the most amazing sandwich, filled with all types of meat, veggies, and more. The sandwich would make anyone, that isn't a vegan, drool. There was one problem. He told everyone in the dorm about the plan, so the real thief wouldn't eat it. The next day, we hear groaning from the bathroom. It's Kevin. He said he had eaten the sandwich because he was hungry, forgetting about the laxatives. He ended up not being able to attend any classes for the day, because of the amount of laxatives he had put in. I have a lot more stories about him, let me know if you want to hear more. TL, Drive. Kevin has a food thief, tries to trap him with laxatives, ends up eating the laxatives.
Kevin the Repairman by GrizzlyBarrister. My HVAC system gave up the ghost and my landlord's engaged HVAC company, which dispatched Kevin to perform an assessment. The day of, he calls me and asks where to park. All of our spaces are numbered, and some say reserved to signify that they're reserved for owners. Unreserved spaces require a parking pass, so I park my car in one and stick the visitor tag in it so Kevin can park in my reserved spot. Park in spot 123, that's my reserved space. If you park anywhere else you'll get towed, I inform a grateful Kevin, who seems to fully grasp the instruction. NBSP. I walk outside to see space 123 totally empty, and Kevin heading up the sidewalk. We have the following exchange. Where's your car? I parked in space 456, it doesn't say reserved. You need to park in space 123. But 456 doesn't say reserved. You need a visitor tag to park in unreserved spaces. 123, directly in front of the door, is my spot. So just park in any unreserved space? No, move your car now to 123. NBSP. Kevin finally makes it inside and takes a look at the indoor HVAC unit, then asks me where the condo's outdoor AC unit is. I tell him I don't have that information since I'm just the tenant. He looks befuddled, then says he'll figure it out and goes to the front of the building. A full half an hour later, I'm working on my laptop and he walks back in. Yeah, I can't find the AC unit. Okay, so what now? I can do any work if I can't find the unit. There are other units behind the building, did you check those? It wouldn't be one of those units. NBSP. Kevin prepares to leave but I have the idea to call another company who does semi-annual HVAC inspections. They state that the unit is in the back of the building and Kevin takes the phone from me while they rattle off the serial number, then he hangs up. I go with him to the back of the building, because at this point I wouldn't trust him to find his own ass using Waze, both hands, and a Garmin, and watch as he searches. After a few minutes of growing increasingly frustrated, I realize that Kevin is inexplicably searching without looking for serial numbers. Kevin informs me he's forgotten the serial number. I call HVAC inspection company back and write down the serial number myself before leaving Kevin to his search. When Kevin walks back into the condo, he says he needs to check the airflow, which involves placing a thermometer on a vent near my 9-foot ceiling. I watch Kevin struggle for a moment. He stares up at the vent, hops up and down a couple of times, tries to parkour off of the wall, and finally turns to me. "Yeah, do you have a ladder?" Kevin asks, without a shred of irony, to the woman living in a 500-square-foot condo in the middle of a major metro area. NBSP. "I don't own a ladder," I say as civilly as possible. Kevin is utterly stumped until I gesture to the crash pad, visibly tucked under the cabinet, and when folded is about a foot high. "I use it for stretching and practicing forward rolls, you can use that." Kevin happily steps on the crash pad and I glance outside at his truck in space 123, sighing heavily. "Also, Kevin, there's a ladder on your truck if you ever need one again." NBSP. Kevin puts his sensor in the vent and says that he needs to install a new fan blade, so I sit back on the couch and go back to work. About an hour later I glance up and notice that Kevin's truck is gone. When I call his cell it goes straight to voicemail, so I call the repair company. I'm more than a little irritated at this point and explain that he's just straight up left, and I'm missing work because of this. The repair company is suitably apologetic and says that Kevin didn't have a fan blade in his car, and it was an hour drive each way back to their shop, which is something he should have told you. Kevin returns, waves at me from the front window and yells that he's going around the back to install the blade, and he'll be back inside to check the airflow again. I go back to my laptop and another hour passes before I look up and notice Kevin's truck is gone. NBSP. I place another irritated call to HVAC company, which explains that not only is Kevin gone for good, and had been for quite some time, but that the fan blade it took him 2 hours to retrieve was a default blade that didn't fit in my particular AC unit, and I'd have to reschedule another appointment because Kevin had to leave. So stay tuned for Kevin 2, Electric Boogaloo.